Welcome to the Marxist Workers Party's podcast, Izwi Labasebenzi, bringing reports and analysis of the news from a working class and Marxist perspective, fighting for jobs for all, a 12,500 Rand per month minimum wage and high quality service delivery, organising to arm the workers and trade union movement with a revolutionary socialist and Marxist programme and policy, building the struggle against capitalism and for working class political power and socialism.
Today is the 22nd of October 2020. In this bulletin, the ANC government continued to serve the interests of domestic and international capital in their Reconstruction and Economic Recovery Program. Racial tensions in the Free State. Instead of a storm of protests, the 7th of October general strike produces only light drizzle. And the Gauteng EPWP workers' campaign continued in a new day of action. Last week, President Ramaphosa presented a new economic reconstruction and recovery plan to Parliament. This new plan follows on from the brutal budget cuts announced in supplementary budget in June, in which the government promised to strip away 250 billion from wages, jobs and service delivery, and comes ahead of next week's medium-term budget policy statement, in which we will be told exactly how this attack will be carried out. The recovery plan reaffirmed the imposition of drastic budget cuts. These are being made to please the credit ratings agencies, Moody's and others, who are backed by the imperialist powers of Europe and the United States. The money saved by the ANC government will be paid to rich global banks and other rich multinational investors, in a case of the rich getting richer and the poor being made poorer. The plan promises the creation of 800,000 jobs over the next 6 months, not even half of those that have been lost since the beginning of the pandemic and lockdown, which currently stand at 2.2 million. Examination of the small print reveals that these are not in fact jobs, but so-called work opportunities. Hundreds of thousands of workers already have direct experience of what this double talk means in practice, through the EPWP program, the community health workers and early childhood development programs, temporary jobs on slave labor wages. The proposal for 1 trillion in infrastructure spending is a carrot and no stick for big business. They will be enticed to invest, not required. This will therefore almost certainly mean a tender-feeding frenzy, allowing big business and the politically connected to line their pockets, making the ANC's PPE procurement scandal look like pocket change. The working class can expect nothing from the capitalist class and its politicians. Left in their hands, any so-called economic recovery will be on the terms and in the interest of big business and not the working class. Working class activists must continue to push for the creation of a mass workers' party to take power from the capitalist class and implement a real program of socialist economic reconstruction, guaranteeing jobs for all, a living wage, and high-quality services.
On the 6th October in Senekal in the Free State, white people protesting the brutal murder of a local farm manager attempted to enforce mob justice, storming the police station where the murder suspects were held, burning a police vehicle in the process. This was incited by the false and racist fantasies of far-right and nationalist white organizations about an alleged white farmer genocide. The so-called respectable face of Afrikaner racism, AfriForum, also helps stoke racist tension with its own version of the white farmer genocide fantasy. 57 people are murdered every day in South Africa, the vast majority of whom are black, including black farm workers, often killed no less brutally than the white Senekal victim. Despite the racial appearance, what is playing out on the farms is the rural version of South Africa's general capitalist social crisis, rooted in growing unemployment, poverty, and inequality reflected in rising crime and violence. Racism remains a serious problem in society. Fundamentally, it is rooted in the class inequalities of capitalism inherited from the colonial and apartheid eras, but maintained over the past 26 years by the ANC government. Therefore, racism cannot be overcome separately from the working class struggle to transform the living conditions of the working class majority by the overthrow of capitalism and building a socialist society. After the generation of ANC rule, only 22% of all farms and agricultural holdings are in the hands of black farmers, accounting for a mere 4% of agricultural land, according to 2017 figures. In reality, the ANC government, slavish supporters of capitalism, refuse to touch big agribusiness, often multinational in character, whose 36,000 farms control 90% of all agricultural land. In rural communities, black farm workers are a super-exploited section of the working class. Farm workers are exempted from the national minimum wage and frequently face evictions from their homes on farms. It is urgent that the trade union movement increase its efforts to organize this sector. However, rather than try and draw out the class issues and push the class struggle in the rural areas into the foreground, the EFF set out to inflame racial tensions further, passing in supporters an invitation of the fringe white far right to do the same, which they predictably did. The EFF demands the nationalization of land without compensation, but it is not a policy for socialist nationalization. For the EFF, nationalization is simply a policy tool to transfer ownership and control of the economy from white capitalists and create new black capitalists. Their real complaint against the ANC government is that this process has been too slow on the land and elsewhere in the economy. Where so-called black ownership already exists, as in the case of so-called traditional land, overseen by unelected traditional leaders like KZN's Ingonyama Trust under the Zulu King. The EFF defends the status quo and the exploitation of the rural population by these elites by exempting them from its allegedly radical policy of expropriation of land without compensation. EFF leader Julius Malema hinted his party's real program in speeches last week. Despite the EFF describing itself as Marxist, at least when it suits its purpose, in Senekal, Malema ripped up every foundation of Marxist theory of the state. Instead of making a clear statement about the class character of the state, that it exists to defend the property and privileges of the capitalist class, black and white, Malema sowed enormous confusion. He declared that the attack on the police station was an assault on the state, which equals an assault on black people because the state is black. This, of course, is the same black state that shot down striking mine workers at Manekana in 2012, killed and brutalized residents during the hard lockdown, and enforces the poverty level minimum wage and anti-trade union laws. In contrast, the Marxist Workers Party calls for the nationalization of big agribusiness, with the farms placed under the democratic control and management of the farm workers and rural communities. This program must be linked to the broader working class struggle for the nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy, the banks, the mines, the big factories and big business, also under democratic control of working class, and linked up according to a democratic plan of production. The economy must become the property of society as a whole. But on this too, last week, the EFF again revealed its real black capitalist program. Malema says he wants black people to own land, banks and mines, but which black people? And on what basis? The EFF is a petty bourgeois party representing the interests of a section of aspirant black capitalists. Its leaders, Julius Malema and Floyd Shubambu, remain suspected beneficiaries of funds stolen from pensioners and looted from the collapsed VBS Bank. The working class, including any genuine members and activists from the EFF, must support the creation of a mass working class party with a clear socialist program.
The general strike called by the COSATU Trade Union Federation and supported by SAFTU, NACTU and FEDUSA federations, who together claim to represent 2.8 million workers, nearly 25% of the workforce, failed to shut down the economy as promised. 10,000 workers did come out despite the lack of preparation and mobilization for the strike. This is so because there is huge anger across the working class. This anger has been reflected in a dramatic increase in daily protests from 2 per day before the pandemic to 8 per day in July, as well as numerous strikes, including across the health sector over PPE by the local government workers in major metros over pay, and strikes at the PIC, the Hout Train, Score Metals, Nature's Garden and Clover factories, to name just a few. But the general strike failed to connect to any of this, let alone harness it as a starting point for a united working class fight back. The strike was consciously sabotaged by the COSATU leadership, which is desperate to protect and prop up the ANC government, whom they still support, despite its anti-working class program through the Tripartite Alliance. Workers were told to stay home on the grounds of obeying COVID regulations. But this was an excuse. The working class is more than capable of organizing protests that abide by genuine health and safety concerns, for example, by marching in strictly isolated contingents of 500 with marshals assigned the additional duty of enforcing social distancing, mask wearing, and the availability of sanitizers at rallies. Unfortunately, the leadership of the largest trade union federation in the country, the Metalworkers, NUMSA, an affiliate of SAFTU, followed COSATU's lead and overwhelmingly kept its members off the streets. Although missing the opportunity to use the 7th of October strike as dress rehearsal, the SAFTU leadership is calling for a general strike on the 2nd of December. As well as ensuring a full mobilization of its own affiliates, the SAFTU leadership must appeal to COSATU, NACTU and FEDUSA to take part. Against the sabotage of the labor lieutenants of capital in the workers' movement, SAFTU members should pioneer the creation of workplace and area-based strike preparation committees to unite workers on the ground, regardless of union affiliation. The date for a new working class summit must be announced from the platform of the 2nd December strike to bring together all fighting sections of the working class, including setting the date for the launch of a socialist mass workers' party that both SAFTU and the first working class summit resolved upon.
On the 12th of October, Gauteng's EPWP workers took part in a day of action initiated by the National Union of Public Sector and Allied Workers, NUPSO. NUPSO has set a shining example to the workers' movement of how to go about organizing the unemployed. In Gauteng, the years-long campaign to win permanent jobs for community health workers has been victorious. Gauteng's community health workers are now permanent employees earning over 8,000 per month. The Marxist Workers Party has played a leading role in the EPWP workers' campaign for permanent jobs and a living wage of 12,500 rand. The Gauteng Department of Infrastructure and Development cruelly dismissed more than 3,000 workers just days before the national lockdown began, leaving workers and their families destitute and starving. The day of action began at the office of the Gauteng Premier in Johannesburg, before EPWP workers moved to the Public Investment Corporation in Pretoria to support workers striking there over changes to bonuses. The day ended outside the Department of Public Service and Administration, responsible for the management of the public sector payroll and therefore responsible for implementing, on the orders of the ANC government, the cancelled public sector pay rise. Addressing the crowd outside the DPSA, NUPSO's national organizer demanded jobs for EPWP workers.
We no longer want EPWP programs in the public service. We want this department to create posts for all the EPWPs in the public service.
And Wiseman Hamilton, General Secretary of the Marxist Workers Party, put forward a clear position on the cancelled public sector pay rise.
We demand the full payment of that salary increase backdated to the 1st of April.
The Marxist Workers Party is an affiliate of the Committee for a Workers' International, the CWI, building global working class unity in the struggle for a socialist South Africa, a socialist Africa and a socialist world. If you would like to join the Marxist Workers Party or find out more about us, including building the CWI in Southern Africa, please visit our website at www.marxistworkersparty.org.za or call or WhatsApp us on 081 366 7375.